Hey, what's going on, everybody? This is Ben Badler here with Baseball America. The next couple of weeks are going to be busy for international scouts. Not that there is a downtime on the calendar anymore for international scouts, but a lot of them are in Colombia right now for the 15 and under Pan American Championship in Cartagena, which runs from August 11th through the 20th. I really love these international tournaments. At this one, it's primarily teams from Latin America as well as the United States. So if you're a scout, you're seeing a lot of the top players eligible to sign next year from Venezuela, the Dominican Republic, Panama, Colombia, Nicaragua. And then a big draw for scouts every time they hold one of these tournaments is obviously the Cuban team. So I wanted to talk today about what happens at these tournaments and why I think they're a great opportunity both for players and for teams. So if you guys like this video, let me know by hitting that like button and leave me a comment below with any of your thoughts or questions that you have. So I'm posting this today right before the tournament starts, and I've seen a lot of these players on the Venezuelan team and the Dominican team already. And this right here, for example, is Gabriel Rodriguez, Venezuelan shortstop. He is one of my favorite players on the team and a player who's going to be one of the prominent prospects in the 2018 class. So this tournament is going to attract hundreds of scouts. The United States team is here, which is great, but the reality is that these are 15-year-old kids, so there isn't a great sense of urgency for scouts with draft coverage to come in and watch these tournaments. This is still Rodriguez here at shortstop. Since the players in the United States are not going to even be draft eligible for at least a couple more years. But having the USA team here is obviously a great opportunity for the players on that team. I think it's a great experience to be able to travel to a foreign country and experience a different culture at that age. But it also just raises the overall quality of play in the tournament, which is extremely valuable for international scouts. You're trying to evaluate the players on the Venezuelan team or the Cuban team, and you get to see how they stack up against some of the top kids in their age group from the United States. A lot of guys who are going to go on to be first-round picks eventually. So that's an important factor because at some of these tournaments, the competition level can vary significantly. Cuba, the United States, those teams are generally going to be very strong every year, but like, for example, at this tournament, you also have Argentina. Sometimes you have teams like Ecuador, typically Brazil as well, which I suppose you could call, developing baseball countries. You have kids who haven't played much baseball, kids who are throwing 60 miles an hour. It's not great competition to gauge against, but these tournaments can attract future big league talent. Franklin Barreto. He killed Team USA back when he played against them as a teenager. Rugnet Odor, Renato Nunez, Julio Urias, Roberto Osuna. They've all played in these events. And then obviously the USA team alumni includes players like Bryce Harper, Manny Machado, Francisco Lindor, Mike Moustakas, Freddie Freeman, Alex Bregman, Addison Russell, Joey Gallo. I mean, I could go on and on. But their 18 and under team in 2009, their lineup had Bryce Harper, Manny Machado, Nick Castellanos, and their pitching staff had, I think, Jamison Tyone, Kevin Gausman, Robbie Ray. Needless to say, they did not lose a game. That is a terrifying team to face. So if you're an international scout, though, one of the main teams that you're focusing on is Venezuela. And I mentioned Odor, Barreto, Nunez. You've got Luis Torrens, the Padres catcher, Ronald Torreyes. They've all played in these events, and so have some of the recent high-profile international signings like Yaikel Blondin, Justin Lopez, Gabriel Arias, Rainford Salinas, who I guess technically is not a signing yet. As of right now, he's still unsigned. But also you've got guys like Daniel Montano, Abraham Gutierrez, Albert Guaymaro. And the reality is, with everything that's going on in Venezuela right now, scouts are just not going into that country as much as they used to. So getting the opportunity to see these players playing games in Colombia is very important. So these are more Venezuelan players here, but then you have other countries like Mexico, Colombia, Panama, Brazil, countries that are not scouted as heavily as the Dominican Republic or Venezuela. But if they have someone who really shines at one of these tournaments, like Eric Pardinho did last year out of Brazil, Luis Gohara, has pitched for them in the past. That can really boost their profile. And then, you might think that the Dominican Republic should be a force at these tournaments. There is a ton of talent in the Dominican Republic, and you see that obviously in the World Baseball Classic, that they can dominate on the international stage. But really at the youth level, the Baseball Federation is not as organized and doesn't always attract top talent to these tournaments. I certainly think it's better than it was, say, 5 years ago. We've seen players like Miguel Andujar, Aramis Adaman, and some other players representing the Dominican Republic during international tournaments, but a lot of the top international signings for a given class, these tournaments aren't going to factor into the equation quite as much for Dominican players. But one of the big draws here for scouts is the Cuban team, and that's because MLB scouts are not allowed to go into Cuba to scout players. So when we're talking about 15-year-old players, the only way to really see them is to go to these international tournaments. And the good thing is the Cuban team typically sends its true top talent, so they usually stack their team as best they can. Now, it used to be you would see a kid who was, at 15 or 16 and, one of these 15 or 16 and under events, and that would be kind of the start or the building block of your reports on a player who you would follow over the years. Now, what's happening is Cuban players are leaving the country younger and younger. So you might see a player at this 15U tournament, and instead of following up on him the next few years as more international tournaments are played and then tracking his career through Cuba's top league, Serie Nacional, now these players are going to a 15U tournament, and not long after they are playing in that tournament, they're leaving Cuba to pursue a contract with a major league team, which places a much higher level of importance on seeing players here and evaluating them while you have the opportunity to build some history on them, because you might be signing them as soon as next year. You never know for certain what's going to happen. So ultimately, I think the more competitive games, just the more games in general you can see players in, the better. If you saw my last video on what happens at a showcase for Latin American players, you saw how I explained how those games are different than normal games, and for good reason. But at these tournaments, it's true competitive game action. And while in one of the big showcases they run in the Dominican Republic, you might go in there and you might get 5 to 10 plate appearances from a guy. At this tournament, if the hitter is good enough that he's in the starting lineup, you're probably going to get 30 to 40 plate appearances from him. And you're seeing players in a competitive environment that's outside their usual comfort zone, in real games, in pressure situations. I know for certain that matters a great deal to a lot of scouts. And then from the player's perspective, I think these tournaments bring a lot of value to their maturation, both on and off the field. I remember talking to Rougned Odor when he was in the minor leagues. He signed with the Rangers out of Venezuela when he was 16 years old, and his first season in pro ball, he skipped the Dominican Summer League, and he even skipped the Arizona League. So he went straight to the short season Northwest League at 17 years old. And that's a league that's heavy on players who were just drafted that year out of college. And Odor was telling me, he said, look, I played in international tournaments in Guatemala, in Mexico, and Taiwan. And yeah, at first, when I went to those tournaments, I used to get homesick. I would miss my family. But he said, by the time I went to that last tournament in Taiwan, it didn't faze me anymore. I was used to the adjustment, and it helped me with that aggressive assignment and getting adapted to being away from home and in a foreign country during that first year with the Rangers. So, and obviously we saw how fast Odor was able to race through the big leagues. Now, obviously, I think he's just he was a super talented player from a young age, but I do think that having that experience was beneficial for him. So I think it could be a big benefit for players. Anything you can do, especially for an international player, to help that player feel more comfortable and more at ease off the field, the easier it's going to be for him to focus on getting better on the field. And international players, they sign, and they're probably going to be living away from home at age like 16 or 17 if they're from the Dominican Republic and they go to the Dominican Summer League. They're at least in their home country, but if you're from Venezuela, Panama, you're going to a new country, and at some point they're going off to rookie ball in the United States, where it can be a very difficult transition for some players. So I'm not saying that an international tournament can totally replicate the experience of going off to a new country, being a 17-year-old kid from Venezuela in his first season living in the Pacific Northwest and playing 60 or so games in the Northwest League. But I do think that having that experience can be beneficial for a player as he prepares for what lies ahead in professional baseball. So there's a lot of scouts in Colombia this week. It's a big tournament, and because so many scouts are there, I know a bunch of agents and trainers are bringing their players in from Venezuela as well as the Dominican Republic and some other countries to have scouts see their players before the tournament begins, putting on some showcases to piggyback off the event, getting more exposure, especially for Venezuelan players and for a lot of Colombian players too, who don't get seen quite as often as their peers in the Dominican Republic. So international scouting, there's never really a downtime on the calendar right now, but this is definitely a busy one for scouts. So I hope you guys liked this video. If you did, let me know by giving it a like and leave me a comment below with your thoughts. And if you want to see more of these videos and support what we do, please subscribe to Baseball America. I think you're getting a ton of value from it. So thanks, guys.